My name is Harold Quinn, and I'm 73 years old. Widower. Retired machinist. And on one Christmas morning, I sat across from my own son while he smiled and told me he was sending me away to die in a nursing home. But that's not where this story starts. Let me back up. It starts with what I heard through a thin wall at 2 in the morning, the kind of thing that changes a man forever. The kind of thing that makes you realize the people you love most might not love you back at all. I worked 12-hour shifts for 47 years. Came home to my wife Eleanor, built a life with these two hands, and saved every penny so that my son Darren wouldn't have to struggle like I did. Our little brick house outside Maplebrook sat on 2 acres. Nothing fancy. Nothing that made neighbors jealous. But it was paid off with sweat and sacrifice, and I always figured Darren would raise his own kids there someday. That was the dream, anyway. Eleanor passed 5 years ago. Cancer. The kind that doesn't give you time to say goodbye the way you want to. After she died, the house got too big and too quiet. Some mornings I'd wake up and forget she was gone, and I'd call out her name before the silence hit me all over again. The holidays were the worst. Christmas used to mean something. Eleanor would decorate. She'd make cookies and hum while she worked. But after she died, I just let the seasons pass. December came and went like every other month. Then Darren called and invited me to spend Christmas with him and his wife Clarissa. I hadn't seen them much since Eleanor died. Life gets busy, people said. Families grow apart. That's just how it goes. But something shifted when he asked. I felt warm for the first time in years. Like maybe this Christmas would be different. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. I packed a small suitcase and brought something Eleanor loved, a tin of her old cookie recipe, oatmeal raisin. When I arrived at their house, Clarissa answered the door with a smile that never reached her eyes. She was beautiful in that calculated way, the kind of woman who measures every sentence before she speaks. She fussed over me like I was some fragile antique. Sit here, Harold. Don't get up. I'll bring you tea. Darren barely looked up from his phone. My grandchildren didn't seem to know who I was. I tried to tell myself that was just the times changing. Families grow apart. People get busy. But something about that house felt rehearsed. Too tidy. Too forced. That night, after dinner, I went to the guest room and lay in bed. The walls were thin. Real thin. And that's when I heard them talking in the hallway. Clarissa's voice came first, sharp and calculated. He's getting older, Darren. He can't live alone anymore. My son answered back, and his words stopped my heart cold. I know, babe. After Christmas dinner, we'll tell him. I already looked at the nursing home near Maplebrook. They've got a room waiting. Clarissa laughed. Actually laughed. Good. It's for his own good. We can't keep taking care of him. Besides, once the house is in our name, we can finally renovate and... Shoo, Darren said. Don't worry. He'll sign whatever I put in front of him. I froze. The air went still in that room. Everything I'd worked for, everything Eleanor and I built together, had become just a renovation project to them. They weren't worried about me. They were counting the square footage. I lay awake the entire night, not angry yet, just hollow. But when morning came, I knew exactly what I had to do. Would you forgive your own child after hearing what I did? Drop your answer in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. You won't believe what happened next. I didn't sleep. Not a single second. I just lay there in that guest room, listening to the house settle around me, replaying those words over and over in my head like a record stuck on the same groove. After Christmas dinner, we'll tell him. The house in our name. He'll sign whatever I put in front of him. My own son. blood of my blood. And his wife, that sharp-eyed woman with a fake smile, egging him on like it was a game. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't hit you all at once. It seeps in slow. First comes the shock, then the disbelief, then something colder. By sunrise, I wasn't shaking anymore. By the time light came through that window, I was calm, clear-headed. The kind of calm a man gets when he realizes he's been living in a dream. I thought about all the things I'd given up. The vacations Eleanor wanted to take. The hobbies I never pursued. The extra time with her I could have had instead of working those 12-hour shifts. I did it all so Darren wouldn't struggle. So he'd have security. A foundation. A home to build his own family in. And this was his gratitude. This was what I'd raised. A man who saw his dying father as an inconvenience. A woman who saw a 2-acre property as square footage for renovations. I got up and walked to the window. The snow was falling outside, quiet and steady. Eleanor used to love watching snow fall. She'd say, "Look, Harold. God's working." She believed in that kind of thing. Grace. Redemption. The idea that even when things fell apart, there was still a plan. I wondered what she'd say if she could see me now. If she could see what our son had become. Then it hit me. She already knew. That's why we'd done what we did, back in 2019, just after she died. She'd known Darren wasn't the man we thought we'd raised. She'd seen the greed creeping in. The way Clarissa looked at the house like it was a prize to be won instead of a home to be lived in. I went back to bed and closed my eyes. Not to sleep. To think. To plan. Because a man doesn't spend 47 years as a machinist without learning how to build something carefully. How to measure twice and cut once. How to create something that lasts. The thing about Eleanor and me, we'd been smart about it. We'd gone to a lawyer after she got sick. After we knew I wouldn't have long without her. We'd set things up the right way. She'd made me promise to protect the house. Not out of greed. Out of principle. She'd said, "Harold, our legacy isn't about money. It's about making sure the people we love actually deserve what we're giving them." I smiled to myself in that dark room. Eleanor was still protecting us. Even now. Even from beyond. When Christmas morning came, I felt different. Lighter somehow. Like a weight had lifted. I knew what I had to do. I knew exactly how to handle this. And it wasn't going to be messy or loud or full of anger. It was going to be something better than that. It was going to be the truth. I got up, showered, and went downstairs. The kitchen smelled like ham and cinnamon. Darren and Clarissa were already up, laughing about something on social media. They looked so pleased with themselves. So confident. They had no idea what was coming. Darren glanced at me and smiled that nervous, patronizing smile. "Merry Christmas, Dad. You sleep okay?" I smiled back. Like a baby, son. Like a baby. And I meant it. Because I just had the best idea of my life, and I knew exactly how to execute it. The question wasn't whether they'd face consequences. The question was whether they'd see it coming. Have you ever had a moment where you realized you knew exactly what needed to happen? Tell me in the comments. And hit that like button if you think justice should be served cold. Christmas morning was beautiful in that fake way holidays always are when nobody's really happy. The lights twinkled on the tree. Darren had one of those jazzy Christmas playlists going, the kind that's more background noise than actual music. Clarissa was in the kitchen fussing over the ham, taking photos every few seconds for Instagram. She had to make sure everyone saw how perfect her life was. How generous she was to include her aging father-in-law in her picture-perfect Christmas. I watched them both move through the house like actors in a play they'd rehearsed 1,000 times. Every gesture was calculated. Every laugh was timed. They were performing Christmas, not living it. And I was the audience they didn't know was watching their performance. My grandchildren came down around 9. They barely acknowledged me. Just grabbed some juice boxes and went back upstairs. I couldn't blame them. They didn't know me. Darren and Clarissa had made sure of that. When you keep a man at a distance long enough, he becomes a stranger. Then a burden. Then just someone to dispose of. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and watched Clarissa work. She kept glancing at me, checking to see if I was upset or suspicious about what was coming. She wanted me calm, off guard, ready to accept whatever they told me without putting up a fight. She had no idea I'd already won this game before it even started. Around noon, Darren suggested we open presents. There was a small wrapped box with my name on it, a generic watch from some department store. Not expensive, not thoughtful, just the bare minimum. Something they could say they'd done. Something they could tell themselves they'd been kind. I opened it and thanked them like it was the greatest gift I'd ever received. That's when I knew for sure what they were really after. They wouldn't have bothered with a present at all if they weren't setting me up for something. The present was a setup, a warm-up, a way to put me in a good mood before they kicked me out. Clarissa made a show of her gift too, some expensive necklace that Darren had bought her. She hung it around her neck and admired herself in the mirror about 15 times. They were already living like they'd won. Like the house and the money and the inheritance were already theirs to spend. Dinner came around 5 o'clock. Ham and scalloped potatoes and those little green bean casseroles that every family makes at Christmas. We sat around the table and made small talk about nothing. The weather, the neighbors, some show they'd been watching. Anything but the truth. Anything but what we all knew was coming. I played my part perfectly. I laughed at their jokes. I complimented the food. I was the grateful old man, happy to be included, content with his place at the table. I was everything they expected me to be. Everything they'd imagined during those whispered conversations in the hallway. Then, when we were halfway through dessert, some store-bought cake that Clarissa was pretending she'd made, Darren set down his fork and cleared his throat. I knew that sound. I'd heard it before through the thin walls of this house. This was the sound of a man about to betray someone and trying to convince himself he had noble reasons for it. "Dad," he said, and his voice had that careful, rehearsed quality to it. "There's something Clarissa and I have been wanting to talk to you about. It's important. It's about your living situation." Clarissa squeezed his arm encouragingly. She was smiling that thin, calculated smile. Like she was helping him do him a favor. Like any of this was about anything except the house and the money they saw sitting in it. I set down my fork too. I looked at both of them and nodded slowly. "Go on, son." Darren took a breath. "We just think it's time you had more support. You know. You've done so much, Dad. You should be comfortable. We found this really nice facility near Maplebrook. They've got great amenities. Recreation. Medical staff. We'll handle everything. We'll help with the move, the paperwork, all of it." Clarissa leaned forward. "It'll be wonderful, Harold. They even have bingo nights and movie screenings. You'll make friends. It'll be good for you." Bingo nights. Like that's what a man's life was supposed to become. Like 73 years of work and sacrifice and love could be reduced to bingo nights and movie screenings in a facility where you wait to die. I felt something rise in my chest, anger, grief, betrayal, but I swallowed it down. I smiled at them. That calm, knowing smile of a man who already held all the cards and was about to show his hand. "After dinner," I said softly, "I'd like you both to watch something with me. A home movie. Something Eleanor and I made a long time ago. I think you'll find it very interesting, Darren. Clarissa clapped her hands together like I just suggested we play charades. Oh, how sweet. Of course, Harold. We'd love to. They had no idea. Not a clue. They were about to walk into the room where their whole plan was going to fall apart, and they thought they were about to watch some sentimental home video of their aging father being nostalgic. The best revenge, I'd realized that morning, wasn't anger. It wasn't yelling or fighting or begging. The best revenge was knowing what they were about to do and being 5 steps ahead the entire time. It was letting them think they had all the power while you held every single card. I smiled and finished my dessert. The evening was just getting started. What would you have done in my position? Would you have confronted them right then, or would you have waited? Tell me in the comments below. And if this story is hitting different for you, smash that like button and subscribe for more. After dinner, I excused myself and walked to the living room like a man who had nowhere particular to be. Like I was just going to sit and watch television for a while. Clarissa and Darren cleaned up the dishes, talking and laughing the way people do when they think they've just successfully closed a deal. They thought they had me figured out. They thought I'd been softened by years of loneliness and was ready to accept whatever they told me. I found the USB drive in my wallet, the one I'd brought with me on purpose. I'd made sure to pack it carefully. I'd known this moment was coming. Not the exact timing, maybe, but the moment itself. The moment when the house came into play. When Darren tried to take what wasn't his to take. I had maybe 3 minutes before they finished cleaning and came looking for me. I walked to their entertainment system, all expensive electronics and touchscreens, the kind of thing that showed you exactly how comfortable they'd already made themselves with my money, and I found the USB port. My hands were steady, calm. I'd had all day to prepare for this, all night to think about what I was going to do. The file was labeled clearly. Home movie. April 14th. 2019. 2 weeks after Eleanor died. I'd recorded it in our living room, sitting in the chair we always sat in, holding Eleanor's photo beside me. My hands had been shaking that day. My voice had cracked a few times. But I'd gotten through it. I'd said what I needed to say, and then I'd put the USB drive away and waited. Waited for this moment. I heard Darren and Clarissa heading toward the living room, their footsteps light and easy. They were relaxed, satisfied, ready to watch what they thought would be some sentimental old man rambling about memories. I pressed play and stepped back. The screen flickered to life. And there I was, 5 years younger, sitting in my living room, holding Eleanor's photo. The date appeared in the corner like the title card of a film. April 14th. 2019. Clarissa's face went white. Darren stared at the screen, his mouth slightly open. The version of me on the screen looked directly at the camera. "Hello, Darren," I said, my voice steady even though I could see the tears on that old recording. "If you're watching this, it means that your mother and I are gone. And it means you've made some choices that I feared you might." Clarissa grabbed Darren's arm. "You see, son," the recording continued, "your mother and I worked our entire lives for that house. We didn't do it for a prize. We did it because it was our home. It meant something. And it should mean something to whoever inherits it. That's why, before she passed, we made a decision. We put the house in a living trust." I watched Darren's face. He was starting to understand now. Starting to see where this was going. "That trust," the recording said, "can't be transferred until both your mother and I are gone. And there's a condition. The occupant, that's me, gets to live there until death by natural causes or personal choice. Any attempt to remove me from that property invalidates your inheritance entirely." Clarissa's hand went to her mouth. The recording smiled. It was my smile, but sadder, older. "So, son, if you're thinking about forcing me out or forging papers, or doing anything to separate me from that house before my time comes. Maybe you should double-check those papers I signed. Maybe you should talk to a lawyer. Maybe you should think very carefully about what happens next." The screen went black. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the hum of the television. Then came a knock at the door. A hard, official knock. The kind that doesn't wait for permission. Darren's eyes went wide. He started to stand, but I held up a hand. "That'll be for me," I said quietly. When Darren opened the door, 2 uniformed officers stood in the frame. They looked like they meant business. Like they'd been waiting for this moment just as long as I had. "Mr. Quinn?" the first officer asked, looking directly at me. "That's me," I said, standing slowly. "We received a report that someone attempted to forge property documents related to a home in Maplebrook," the officer said. His eyes shifted to Darren. "We have a signed affidavit from a notary who was approached last week. According to the notary, your signature was copied using a digital scan and used to create forged transfer documents." Darren started to stammer. "That's a mistake. I didn't." "You'll need to come with us for questioning," the officer said. Clarissa started crying. Not the beautiful, composed kind of crying she did for Instagram. Real crying. The kind where your face falls apart and you sound like an animal in pain. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. I just watched as they led my son toward the door. As the door closed behind them, I turned off the television and the screen went dark again. Have you ever seen someone's plan completely fall apart right in front of them? Tell me what you thought when you saw those police officers walk through that door. Hit like if you think justice just got served. Subscribe for the next chapter, because this story gets even better. That night, I sat alone in their perfect living room. The Christmas lights still twinkled on the tree. The candles still smelled like cinnamon and pine. Everything was exactly the same, and yet nothing was ever going to be the same again. Clarissa was upstairs in their bedroom, crying. I could hear her muffled sobs through the walls. Ironic, considering I'd been the one listening through walls just the night before. I made myself a cup of coffee in their kitchen and sat at the table. I didn't gloat. That's not what this was about. I didn't feel satisfaction or triumph or any of those things people always say you're supposed to feel when justice gets served. I just felt tired and sad and oddly at peace with the way things had turned out. I thought about Eleanor, about what she used to say about people's hearts. She had this thing she'd tell me sometimes, usually when I was upset about something. "Harold," she'd say, "people reveal their hearts when they think you have nothing left to give." She meant it as a warning, but also as wisdom. She was telling me that the way people treated you when you couldn't do anything for them anymore, that was when you'd see who they really were. She was right. It took Darren's greed to show me who my son actually was. I didn't sleep that night either. I just sat in that quiet house and watched the hours pass. Around 3 in the morning, Clarissa came downstairs. She looked like she'd been through a washing machine. Her makeup was smeared. Her hair was all over the place. She sat down across from me at the table, and for a long time, she didn't say anything. Finally, she asked, "Harold, what are you going to do?" I looked at her. This woman I'd never understood. This woman who'd seen my son and decided he was worth marrying because of what he could give her. This woman who'd looked at a grieving old man and seen a problem to be solved. I smiled. Not mean. Just sad. "There's something in the kitchen," I said. "On the counter. You should probably read it." She got up slowly and walked over to the counter. I heard her breath catch when she saw the papers I'd left there. The new will. The updated deed. The one Eleanor and I had arranged, just in case. Just in case our son turned out to be exactly the kind of person we'd hoped he wouldn't be. I'd made a decision about the house. It wasn't going to Darren. It wasn't going to anyone in our family. It was going to the Maplebrook Veterans Home for Widowed Veterans. The same organization Eleanor had volunteered with before she got sick. The same organization that had helped so many people, including some of Darren's own grandfathers, when they'd lost their wives and had nowhere to turn. Eleanor would have been proud. She always said that money meant nothing. Legacy was everything. And the real legacy wasn't what you left behind in terms of dollars and square footage. It was how you'd lived and what you'd stood for. When Clarissa finished reading the papers, she turned to me with tears streaming down her face. "You can't do this," she whispered. "You can't. We did everything for you. We invited you here. We tried to help you." "You tried to steal from me," I said quietly. "You tried to forge my name. You tried to have me taken away from the only home that still connects me to Eleanor. Don't call that helping." She started to say something else, but I stood up. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to have a conversation. There was nothing left to say between us. "I'm going to bed," I told her. "In the morning, I'm going home." "This is your home," Clarissa said desperately. "You can stay here." "No," I said. "My home is the one Eleanor and I built. The one you were trying to take. And that's where I'm going." By dawn, I'd packed my things. Just a small bag, the same suitcase I'd brought with me. I left the house before Clarissa woke up. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say goodbye. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just walk away and let people sit with what they've done. The drive back to Maplebrook took about an hour. Snow was falling again, just like the night I'd arrived at Darren's house. Just like the morning after I'd heard them planning to throw me out. The roads were quiet. The world was quiet. It felt like the snow was washing everything clean. When I pulled up to my house, it looked the same as it always had. The brick was still red. The porch still needed to be sanded and repainted. Eleanor's garden, long dormant for winter, was just a patch of white. But it was mine. It was real. And it didn't come with betrayal or greed or the kind of love that measures itself in dollars. What surprised you the most about how this all played out? Tell me in the comments. And subscribe because the next chapter is where you find out what really happened to Darren, and I promise you, it gets intense. I made coffee that first morning back home and stood at the kitchen window watching the snow melt. The sun was coming up over the trees at the back of the property, and everything looked clean and new. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My heart wasn't racing. For the first time in days, I felt like I could actually breathe. The phone rang around 9 o'clock. I knew who it was before I answered. I could feel it. That pull that connects you to your blood no matter what they've done, no matter how badly they've betrayed you. I picked up the receiver and said nothing. Just listened. "Dad." Darren's voice was small. Scared. He was calling from somewhere with a lot of echo, like a place with hard walls and fluorescent lights. "Dad, are you there?" I didn't say anything. I just held the phone to my ear and listened to him breathe. He was crying. Actually crying. My son. The man who'd plotted to steal my home and throw me away was crying into a prison phone. "Dad, I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking." Clarissa, she pushed me into it. She said if we got the house, we could fix our marriage. She said we needed money. She said. I hung up. Not angry. Not in a mean way. Just done. That was it. The conversation was over before it started. The police had arrested him for forgery and attempted fraud. They'd found evidence on his computer, drafts of the forged documents, emails between him and a notary he'd tried to bribe. The notary had turned him in instead. Good people still existed in the world. They just weren't in my son's circle. Over the next few days, The story came together. Darren was facing felony charges. His lawyer was talking plea deals. Clarissa was cooperating with the police, trying to save herself. She was claiming she'd been coerced. She was claiming Darren had come up with the whole thing. All the betrayal, all the cruelty. Suddenly, it was his alone. Their marriage was already falling apart, and they'd only been separated for 72 hours. I didn't care about any of it. Not really. I cared about the fact that the house was safe. I cared about the fact that Eleanor's wishes were going to be honored. I cared about the fact that widowed veterans were going to have a place to go when they felt like I'd felt. Too empty, too lost, too old to matter. On the fourth day, I got a letter in the mail from Darren's lawyer. He was requesting a meeting. He was claiming that Darren wanted to plead guilty if I would agree to not press additional charges. He wanted to negotiate. I threw the letter in the fire. Eleanor used to say that some people could live their whole lives without learning the most important lesson. And that lesson was this: you can't undo betrayal by saying sorry. You can't erase what you've done by crying or begging or making promises you never kept in the first place. Apology only means something if the person offering it understands what they actually did. Darren didn't understand. He thought this was about money. He thought if he said sorry enough times, he could get the house back. He thought if he played the victim and blamed Clarissa, his father would forgive him. He was wrong. I went to the county courthouse a week later and gave my statement to the prosecutor. I was calm. I was clear. I explained what I'd heard through the walls. I explained what they'd tried to do. I explained that this wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about making sure people understood that there were consequences for their choices. The prosecutor looked at me with something like respect. "You're a strong man, Mr. Quinn," she said. "A lot of fathers would be trying to find a way to protect their sons." "A lot of fathers raised their sons better," I answered. Darren ended up taking a plea deal anyway. 2 years in a federal prison. Not for what he'd tried to do to me specifically, but for the forgery and the attempted fraud and the bribery. The system had done its job. Justice wasn't perfect, but it had been served. I didn't go to the sentencing hearing. I didn't need to see my son in handcuffs. I didn't need to watch him apologize to a judge. I didn't need any of it. I needed to move forward, to heal, to remember that I wasn't the problem in this story. I wasn't the one who'd chosen greed over family. I wasn't the one who'd measured love in square footage. But I did something that day, while Darren was sitting in a courtroom learning his fate. I went to the lawyer's office and signed the final papers donating the house to the Maplebrook Veterans Home. I signed it all official, made it legal, made it permanent. By the end of that day, it wasn't my house anymore. It was a refuge for people who understood what it meant to lose everything and have to learn how to live again. Eleanor would have loved that. She would have been sitting next to me while I signed, squeezing my hand and saying, "This is right, Harold. This is exactly right. Tell me something. Has anyone ever tried to take advantage of your family? Have you had to make a hard choice about protecting yourself? Drop your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's going through the same thing. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story on this channel." The quiet came after that. Real quiet. Not the lonely kind I'd felt after Eleanor died, but the peaceful kind. The kind that lets you think. The kind that lets you heal. I filled my days with small things. I fixed the fence Eleanor had always wanted me to fix. I painted the porch. I planted new bushes in the garden because I decided it was time for new things to grow. I wasn't running from my pain or hiding from what had happened. I was just living. Living in the way Eleanor would have wanted me to live. The house felt different now that it didn't belong to me anymore. Lighter somehow. like I'd been carrying the weight of it without even knowing it. Like the house had been a responsibility, and now it was just a place. And that was okay. That was actually better. The veterans' home called me after a few months. They wanted to know if I'd be willing to come speak to the residents. They wanted me to tell my story, to tell them why I donated the property, to show them that there were still people in the world who cared about people who'd been left behind. I almost said no. I'm not a public speaker. I never was. But then I thought about Eleanor, about what she would have wanted, and I said yes. The day I went to the home, I wore my best shirt, the one Eleanor had bought me for our 40th wedding anniversary. It was navy blue with little gold threads running through it. Nothing fancy, just something that showed I cared enough to try. There were about 40 people gathered in the main room, men and women, all different ages, though we were all at least 60, all widowed, all dealing with that strange loneliness that only comes when you lose the person you built your life with. I stood in front of them and I didn't have notes. I didn't have a speech prepared. I just talked. I told them about Eleanor, about working 12-hour shifts, about coming home to her and feeling like everything was worth it, about the house and what it meant to us. But mostly I told them about what happened when I let people take advantage of my love. I told them that protecting yourself wasn't selfish, that saying no to people who wanted to hurt you wasn't cruel, that your life and your dignity and your peace of mind were worth fighting for. I'm not here to say I did everything right, I told them. I didn't. I trusted too much. I assumed my son would be the man Eleanor and I tried to raise him to be. I was wrong. But I also didn't let that wrongness destroy me. I learned from it. I moved forward. And now I'm here, in a place Eleanor wanted to be, with people who understand what loss actually means. An old woman in the front row was crying. She had kind eyes, the sort that had seen a lot of heartbreak but still believed in people anyway. "What did you do when you figured out what they were planning?" she asked. "Did you confront them? Did you yell?" "No," I said. "I waited. I prepared. I let them walk into their own mistakes. And I made sure that when the dust settled, I wasn't the one who got hurt." "That's wise," she said. "That's very wise." After the talk, a lot of people came up to me. They wanted to shake my hand. They wanted to tell me their stories. They wanted to know how to protect themselves, how to move forward, how to stop feeling like their lives were over just because they'd been betrayed. I listened to all of them, every single one, because that's what Eleanor would have done. She would have sat with them in their pain and shown them that they weren't alone. One man told me he'd been kicked out of his house by his daughter too. He'd ended up homeless for 8 months. He was just starting to feel like a person again after 5 years at the home. He thanked me for the donation. He thanked me for caring about people I didn't know. "I didn't do it for thanks," I told him. "I did it because Eleanor believed in second chances. And I did it because somebody has to. Somebody has to remember that old people matter, that our lives matter." When I left that day, I felt lighter, like something had healed that I didn't even know was broken. I drove home slowly, watching the sun start to set. I thought about my son sitting in a prison cell, probably thinking about the life he could have had if he'd just been a decent person. I thought about Clarissa, divorced now and starting over, learning that betrayal doesn't actually lead to happiness. I thought about Darren's children, who would grow up knowing their father had stolen and lied and tried to hurt their grandfather. And I thought about Eleanor, about how she'd known this was coming, how she'd prepared, how even in death, she was protecting me. When I got home, I made a cup of tea and sat on the porch. The sun was almost gone now, and the sky was that beautiful purple that only happens for a few minutes each evening. I raised my cup toward the sky. "We did good, Eleanor," I said softly. "We really did good." The only answer was the sound of the wind in the trees. But that was enough. That was everything. What lesson have you learned from someone you loved? What did they teach you that kept you safe? Share that in the comments and help someone else understand that love isn't just about feeling good. Sometimes love is about preparation. Sometimes love is about seeing danger before it arrives. Subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications. There are more stories coming. Stories about real people learning real lessons about justice, about family, about what it means to stand up for yourself. 6 months passed like chapters in a book you've already read. You know how it ends, so you just turn the pages without really thinking about it. Darren was in prison. Clarissa had moved to a different state and started her life over somewhere I'd never know. My grandchildren barely remembered I existed, and I'd made peace with that a long time ago. The house was being rebuilt. The Maplebrook Veterans Home had architects and builders coming in. They were turning it into something bigger and better. They were adding rooms for residents. They were creating a community center with a library. They were making it into exactly what Eleanor would have wanted it to be. I wasn't involved in the construction, but I got progress reports. They'd send me photos. They'd update me on timelines. They wanted me to know that what I'd given them was being used the right way, that it mattered. I got a phone call one afternoon that surprised me. It was from Darren's lawyer. Apparently, my son wanted to write me a letter. He wanted the lawyer to make sure I actually read it. I almost threw it away without opening it. Almost. But something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was Eleanor whispering from somewhere that I should at least try to understand what my son had become. I opened the letter. It wasn't an apology. Not really. It was a confession. Darren had written about his life in prison. About the time he'd had to think about what he'd done. About the moment he'd realized that his greed had cost him everything. His freedom. His family. His future. He wrote about the other men in prison who'd made similar choices. Men who'd hurt their families because they thought money mattered. Men who'd discovered too late that it didn't. He wrote about the chaplain who'd been helping him find some kind of faith or peace, or whatever you call it when you're trying to rebuild yourself from nothing. The last paragraph was what got me. He wrote, "I know I can't fix what I did. I know I can't take it back. But I want you to know that I see it now. I see what you and Mom tried to teach me. I see what I threw away. And I'm trying to be better, even if it's too late for us. I'm trying to be the man you wanted me to be. I'm just doing it 5 years too late." I sat with that letter for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I felt sad in a way that was almost peaceful. My son was learning his lesson. He was understanding. But understanding doesn't fix broken things. Understanding doesn't bring back the years. Understanding doesn't change what happened. I wrote him back. Just a short note. I told him I was glad he was learning. I told him that Eleanor would have wanted him to find redemption. I told him that I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because holding on to anger was only hurting me. I told him that I wouldn't be visiting, that we wouldn't be rebuilding what we had. But I wished him well. I wished him a good life when he got out. I didn't tell him about the house. I didn't tell him that his inheritance was gone. He probably knew. He'd probably read about it in the news. Local man donates 2-acre property to veterans' home. It had been a small story in the local paper. Nothing massive. But it had been there. That letter was the last communication we had. After that, there was just silence. Not the painful kind anymore. Just the kind that comes after you've said everything that needed to be said and you've accepted that some relationships can't be repaired. They can only be released. Around that time, I started volunteering at the veterans' home. Just a few hours a week. I'd work in the gardens, helping the residents grow things. I'd sit with them and listen to their stories. I'd show them that there was life after betrayal, that there was peace after heartbreak. One of the residents, an old woman named Margot, asked me one afternoon why I cared so much. Why I spent my time with people I didn't know. Why I didn't just take my life and move on. Because Eleanor cared, I told her. And because somewhere, there's probably a woman sitting alone in a house, about to get the kind of phone call that changes everything. And I want her to know that people like me exist. People who understand. People who've survived what she's about to go through. Margot squeezed my hand. She had arthritis, so her grip wasn't strong. But it was genuine. You're a good man, Harold. I'm just a man trying to honor someone I loved, I said. The seasons changed. Fall came, and the leaves turned colors that made you believe in beauty again. Then winter came, and the snow fell on the property, my former property, and the new structure rose up out of the white like a promise being kept. I didn't go to the grand opening. I didn't want to be the center of attention. I didn't want people to make this about me. But I did drive by the day it opened. I sat in my car and watched families and residents walk through the front doors. I watched people who'd lost everything find a place where they mattered again. Eleanor would have been so proud. Have you ever realized that letting something go was the best thing you could do? Tell me in the comments. Your story might help someone else understand that the most powerful act isn't holding on. It's knowing when to let go. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. We have more stories coming. Stories about real people, real consequences, real redemption. Share your thoughts in the comments. Help others see that justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just peaceful. 2 years after that Christmas, I was sitting in my kitchen on a regular Tuesday morning when I realized I wasn't sad anymore. I was just living. Not existing. Not surviving. Actually living. I was making eggs for breakfast. I was reading the newspaper. I was thinking about what I wanted to do with the rest of my day. That was it. That was the whole thing. Darren had been released from prison after 18 months. Good behavior, early release, the system working the way it was supposed to. I didn't know where he was. I didn't know what he was doing. And I didn't need to know. That part of my life was over. The chapter was closed. What surprised me was when I didn't feel angry about it anymore. I didn't feel disappointed. I just felt sad that he'd wasted so much of his life. And then I let that sadness go too. Grief does strange things to people. It makes you hold on to things that are already dead. Eleanor taught me that. She taught me it in the last weeks of her life, when she was letting go of everything. She wasn't holding on to life with her fingernails, screaming and fighting. She was making peace with the fact that some things end. And she was teaching me to do the same. I started going to a church again. Not the one we went to when Eleanor was alive. That place had too many memories. I went to a smaller place, a Methodist church on the edge of town. The pastor was a young woman named Reverend Sarah, and she had a way of speaking about faith that didn't make it sound like you had to be perfect to believe. She talked about grace like it was actually something you could have, even when you'd made mistakes. After service one Sunday, she asked me to help her work on the church gardens. They were planning to plant a memorial garden for people who'd been lost. She wanted me to help design it. I asked her why she was asking me. "Because I've heard about you," she said. "I've heard about your house, about your son, about the choice you made. I think someone who understands loss the way you do should help us create a space for people to grieve. So I did. Every Saturday morning, I'd go to the church and work on that garden. I'd plant flowers. I'd design pathways. I'd create benches where people could sit and remember. It wasn't much. It wasn't a grand gesture. But it was something. It was a way of honoring Eleanor that felt right. The Veterans Home had named the library after my wife. They'd put a plaque on the wall, Eleanor Quinn Memorial Library. A place for learning, healing, and remembering. The first time I saw it, I cried. Not sad tears. Just tears of gratitude. Tears of knowing that her name would mean something to people long after I was gone. I got a letter from the director of the home telling me that the facility was full. There was a waiting list of widowed veterans who wanted to come there. They'd already helped 300 people. 300 people who'd been lost and alone and had found their way back to living. Eleanor had known. Somehow, even in death, even before any of this happened, she'd known that the house needed to be used for something bigger than just one family. Something bigger than just inheritance and property values and renovation projects. I was 76 years old now. My hands weren't as strong as they used to be. My back hurt when I worked in the gardens for too long. My eyes needed glasses now, and sometimes I forgot things. But I was here. I was alive. I was still choosing to show up. I'd never told anyone the whole truth about what happened that Christmas. Not completely. People knew the basics. They knew I'd been betrayed. They knew my son had gone to prison. They knew I'd given the house away. But they didn't know about the recording. They didn't know about me sitting up all night planning. They didn't know about the cold, calculated way I'd let him walk into his own trap. Some people might say that made me as bad as him. That I'd been just as calculated and manipulative. But Eleanor would have said it was the difference between justice and revenge. Revenge is when you hurt someone because they hurt you. Justice is when you let people face the consequences of their own choices. I'd let Darren face consequences. But I'd also forgiven him. I'd written him back. I'd let him know that I didn't hate him. I just didn't want to know him anymore. There's a difference, even if it's a small one. I think about what my life would have been like if I'd reacted differently that night. If I'd confronted them. If I'd yelled and fought and tried to force them to see the error of their ways. I probably would have been dismissed. I probably would have been made to feel like an ungrateful old man who didn't understand that they were just trying to help. Instead, I'd let the truth speak for itself. I'd let the papers tell the story. I'd let the consequences do the teaching. And somehow, even though my son would never inherit the house, even though our relationship would never be repaired, I think he learned more from what I did than he would have if I just screamed at him in the moment. The memorial garden was finished in June. It was beautiful. There were roses and lilies and little stone benches. There was a pathway lined with small lights that lit up at night. People came from all over town to see it. And on the first day it was open to the public, an old man sat on one of the benches and cried for his wife of 52 years. I sat with him for a while. I didn't say much. I just sat there and let him know he wasn't alone. That's what Eleanor would have wanted me to do. That's the only thing that matters in the end. Tell me something real. Tell me about a time you had to make a hard choice to protect yourself or someone you love. Tell me in the comments below. Your story might be the thing that keeps someone else going. That might be the moment that helps them understand they're not alone. Subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications. We have more stories coming about real people, real struggles, and real redemption. Share your thoughts. Share your experiences. Help build a community where people understand that life is complicated and love is complicated, and sometimes the strongest thing you can do is just keep showing up. Thank you for being here. I'm 80 now. My hair is white now, what's left of it. My hands shake sometimes when I'm tired. I move slower than I used to. But I'm still here. I'm still showing up at the garden on Saturdays. I'm still volunteering at the veterans' home. I'm still living the life Eleanor believed I deserved to live. People ask me sometimes if I regret anything. If I wish I'd done things differently. If I wish I'd been softer with Darren or more forgiving of Clarissa. If I wish I still had my son. The honest answer is no. I don't regret protecting myself. I don't regret letting him face the consequences of his choices. I don't regret giving the house to people who needed it more than my blood relatives ever would. What I regret is all the years I spent thinking that love meant letting people hurt you. That family meant putting up with betrayal. That loyalty was something you offered without asking for anything in return. Eleanor taught me better than that. And it took me 73 years to finally listen. The house stands now as a monument to something real. The Maplebrook Veterans Home has helped over 500 people. 500 widows and widowers who came in broken and left better. 500 people who understood that life could continue after loss. That healing was possible. That you didn't have to spend your final years feeling like a burden. That's Eleanor's legacy. That's what our life together meant. Not the square footage. Not the property value. But the lives we touched. The people we helped. The fact that when we're gone, something good remains. Darren never came back to Maplebrook that I know of. He's probably living somewhere else now, probably married to someone new, probably trying to build a different life. I hope he's happy. I hope he learned something from all of this. But I don't expect him to. Some people spend their whole lives not learning. And that's their choice to make. I forgave him long ago. Not because he deserved it. But because holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting it to hurt him. It only hurt me. So I let it go. And in letting it go, I finally found peace. The real lesson here isn't about revenge. It's not about being clever or planning things carefully or letting people walk into their own mistakes. The real lesson is about knowing your own worth. The real lesson is understanding that protecting yourself isn't selfish. That saying no to people who want to hurt you isn't cruel. That your life and your dignity and your peace of mind are worth fighting for. Eleanor knew that. She lived that. And even though I was slow to understand it, I finally got there in the end. I walk the memorial garden every morning now. I walk past the plaques and read the names of people being remembered. I think about their families. I think about the ones they left behind. I think about all the different ways love shapes our lives, even after the people we love are gone. Sometimes visitors ask me about the history of the place. They ask who Eleanor Quinn was, why we honored her with a library, and I tell them the truth. I tell them she was a woman who understood that the most valuable thing you can give people is your time, your presence, your willingness to sit with them in their pain and show them they're not alone. I tell them she was a woman who knew her own worth and refused to let it be diminished by anyone. I tell them she built a life that meant something. And even after she was gone, that life continued to mean something. Last month, a woman came to the garden and sat on one of the benches for a long time. She was crying. When she finally left, she came over to me and said, "Thank you. I didn't know places like this existed. I thought I was the only one who understood what it's like to lose everything." "You're never the only one," I told her. "There's always someone who understands. You just have to be willing to look." That's what this whole thing has been about, really. Not the house. Not the money. Not even Darren's crimes or his punishment. It's been about showing people that when you lose everything, you can still build something new. When you're betrayed, you can still find peace. When the people you love disappoint you, you can still choose to honor the love itself instead of the people who failed you. Eleanor and I didn't build a family legacy by having perfect children. We built it by teaching that integrity matters, that loyalty matters, that how you treat people when they can't do anything for you anymore says everything about your character. I'm satisfied with that legacy. I'm at peace with how things turned out. And when my time comes to sit down on one of those benches in the garden and close my eyes for the last time, I'll do it knowing that Eleanor and I lived a life that mattered. That's all any of us can hope for, really. Not perfection. Not revenge. Not even happiness in every moment. Just a life that meant something. A life that helped someone. A life that showed people they weren't alone. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for caring about what happened. And thank you for understanding that the best revenge isn't loud or flashy or meant to hurt people. The best revenge is living well. The best revenge is showing kindness to people who need it. The best revenge is peace. If you found something in this story that touched your heart, I want you to do me a favor. Tell me about it in the comments below. Share your own experience with betrayal or loss or redemption. Because your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. Subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications so you don't miss the stories coming next. These are stories about real people making real choices. Stories about what happens when we stand up for ourselves. Stories about what happens when we choose integrity over greed. Stories about what happens when we remember that the people we love are watching us, even after they're gone. Share this video. Share your thoughts. Build this community with me. Because in the end, we're all just trying to figure out how to live a life that matters. And none of us should have to do that alone.